Any review of the 1290 Super Duke R will inevitably contain the words beast and weapon. But is that all there is to KTM's Big Super Naked? The 2022 KTM 1290 Super Duke R is brimming with power and tech, and there is no doubt that it is a very purposeful machine. So I've spent the last week or so trying to find out if this 180 horsepower naked bike is more of an all-rounder than you might think. If you want the very short version of this video, then the answer to that is yes, there is more, very much more. But let's persevere with the review. And I'll start where I normally start when I'm out on the road, and that's talking about the ergonomics. And I have to say, I was pleasantly surprised at how comfortable this bike is. Yes, it is a little bit of a arse up, handlebars down type of setup. At 835mm, it's a relatively tall seat, I guess, for this. And you are canted a little bit forward. You've got nice big wide sort of 760mm, I think they are, bars, nice and wide. You're not down on the like with clip-ons like you would be on a sports bike, but you are definitely canted forward just enough to be aggressive, but not enough that you do get any kind of pressure on your wrists. And actually, one thing they have done on this bike is reduce the throttle twist by 7%. So you get a much better throttle response, but when you're turning the throttle full on, you haven't got as much wrist bend. My legs are nicely bent, but not too tucked up. Having a slightly taller bike helps with not having to really scrunch your legs up to give you clearance. The Alcantara cover seat is broad and comfortable. It's quite well padded. And I have to say, I picked it up expecting it to be a little bit of an uncomfy ride on the way back from KTM HQ. And actually I spent 3 hours pretty much on the bike, only stopping once when I found a petrol station that had some fuel. I had no problems at all, no aches or pains. It's an incredibly comfortable bike. I was surprised. You could spend all day on this with no difficulties, and that's coming from a middle-aged creaky old man. Controls is good. These are the controls straight off the 1290 Super Adventure. Keyless ignition, and of course the very clear KTM TFT screen. I always like what they do with their TFTs. They don't put anything on there that doesn't need to be on there. And we'll talk more about the modes. As standard, you've got rain, street and sport. You can also have track and performance switched on. Track is full on track mode. You can change the slip of the rear wheels, you can disable all of the traction control, all of the ABS, everything you want. The performance is kind of a street version of that. So you can do all of that, but you also manage to keep things like the KTM My Ride and the cruise control, which would normally be disabled in that. So if you do a lot of track days, worth spending the money on. If you don't do the track days, probably not, I would say. If you've got the money to throw at it, then why not? But yeah, there you go. There's probably not much more to talk about in terms of ergonomics. Everything's good, everything's nicely done. But the one thing that did surprise me when I first jumped on this, given that it is 177 horsepower, not 180 as I said earlier on, but it's as near as, damn it, and 140 newton meters of torque, with the reputation that KTM have, and with the kind of branding that they use, this whole ready to race and calling it the beast and everything else, you kind of expect it to be aggressive and angry. And whilst it can be those things, actually put it in street mode and bimble away, and it's all very genteel, not intimidating, nice and relaxed. Obviously you've got a shit ton of power on your right hand, but it doesn't feel like it's goading you on all the time to go on, go on, go on. It's a very pleasurable bike to ride. You do get full power in street mode. The only mode that dampens the power is rain, and then knocks it down to about 100 horsepower, so it takes 77 horsepower off, which is no bad thing when it's wet, and it will switch all of the traction control on and just literally the most of everything. Street mode dials back that traction control. Sport sharpens the throttle response, dials that traction control back a little bit more. The wheelie control is still there in sport, but what you can do is choose how much of it is there.
In street mode it's just there all the time and it will stop the front wheel from lifting. In sport you will get the front wheel lifting, but you can kind of choose by how much it does lift. But as you can see here, pottering around 25-30 miles an hour, it's fine. And as soon as you get a bit of open road, the beast is unleashed and the bike comes alive. 140 newton meters of torque makes this a very flexible engine. See if I can get a quick overtake in here. So I'm 50 miles an hour in 5th gear. Do I need to change down? No, I don't. You've still got that wash mist headlight on the front, but the gap in the middle is actually a ram air, so that forces air in through the middle. It gives that nice forced air into the airbox, which really helps the bike to breathe. It also means that we haven't got a lot of other gubbins around the side. We can get most of that air in coming straight through the front. The Quickshifter is fantastic. Up and down, I've had no issues with the Quickshifter at all. And as you can probably hear, the sound of that exhaust and the induction roar is very, very nice. I'm coming down this road specifically because it's a bit of a rough surface. It's a bit jiggly, it's a bit washboardy, so I want to see how this WP 48mm Apex suspension is doing its job. It is fully adjustable, so I've got compression and rebound on the front and on the back that I can play around with. I haven't touched it at the moment and I'm finding it to be pretty good. It's plush enough that it gives a comfortable ride, but it still feels firm and direct. To really show this bike and its full potential, you'd need to be A, a much better rider than me, and B, you'd need to be on a track as well. So I'm looking at this from a road riding perspective. Obviously that's where they're going to spend the majority of their time, and as I say, in the opening blurb there's lots of talk about how the bikes are a beast and monsters and aggressive and I think sometimes that might put people off. Okay, there are a lot of people that are going to want that. It doesn't really push my buttons, but then I've absolutely thoroughly enjoyed riding this bike. I've ridden it through towns like this, I've ridden it on little country lanes. It's good on the motorway, but obviously it is a naked bike. Unfortunately, I did get the opportunity to test out the brakes in anger. I was taking a very odd route back home and going through the middle of Biggleswade. Thankfully, at 30 miles an hour, somebody decided to turn right, coming in the opposite direction, right in front of me, about 20 yards away. Even with these brakes yanking on the front brake and a big footful of rear brake, I only just missed her by about 1.5 feet. She didn't even see me actually, she just carried on up the side road. And I think if I'd have been on my 790 Adventure, where the brakes are not quite as sharp, I might not have been so lucky. So these brakes are fantastic. They're Stylema 4-pot calipers, big rotors, lots of power, but really nice feel to them as well, good modulation. I do feel quite comfortable trail braking into corners. There's a lot of feel in that front end. You know exactly what's going on. I can really trust it. The Bridgestone, I think they're S22, but the Bridgestone tyres help as well, really good. Well, they have been really good so far. I've not ridden them in the wet. And on twisty roads like this, this bike is just such a hoot to ride. As I say, it's not intimidating. It's fast, yeah, but it's not scary. You feel like you've got such good control over it. It's such a well composed bike. It's not, you know, getting jittery under braking into the bends. It is just doing exactly what you want it to do and what you tell it to do. It's so quick to turn, change the direction. It is a wonderful thing. Previously, one of my most favourite naked bikes to ride from a point of view of handling is the 890 Duke, the KTM 890 Duke, and it still is. And this is just like the 890 Duke that's been down the gym for a few years and taken far too many steroids. But if you're looking for a fine handling naked bike, then you can't go far wrong with this. Obviously the styling is going to divide opinion. I wouldn't say it's a beautiful bike. I don't think it's a bad looking bike, but I wouldn't say it's a beautiful bike. I don't like the orange wheels for a start, but that's not important. The important thing is how this bike performs. And certainly if you want a bike with presence, and I've had quite a lot of comments on this bike from people, so it certainly gets attention, and so it should. Costing £16,349 I think it is from memory. It's a fair chunk of money, but it is also a fair chunk of bike. Now's my chance. Here we go, overtakes, absolute breeze. Oh my god, but it's just so sure-footed, this machine. Always tricky, gravel in the middle of the corners, you've got to watch out for that. Messed my line up a little bit, but there you go. It's one of my favourite little stretches of road, this. It's just a lovely ribbon of tarmac, normally pretty quiet as well. But as I was saying, in street mode, it's nice and relaxed, it's not snatchy, the fueling's good. Got a very nice genteel throttle, it really behaves itself. It's when you start twisting that thing that it all gets a little bit mental. It is a fast bike, it can be aggressive, but it doesn't have to be. So in answer to my question at the beginning, is it more than just a beast or a weapon? I think it is. I think you could use this to travel long distances on, even do some touring. Assuming you don't want to take too much luggage, if you can strap a little bag to the seat, maybe wear a rucksack, or if you're the sort of person that travels with a credit card and a toothbrush, you can get a long way very quickly and have a great amount of fun, but still do it in comfort. It is one hell of a naked bike. Such an addictive surge of power, along with the noise that goes with it. Nice work, KTM, nice work. I don't really know there's much more I can tell you about it whilst riding it. I just wanted to give you a flavour of what this bike is without necessarily churning through all of the specs. I could go through all of the settings on here and how they work, but that's it's a little bit dull, to be honest. It has got the KTM My Ride app on there, so if you've used that before, I think it's pretty useful. You can take calls if you're wearing a headset, listen to music, and then you've got turn-by-turn navigation, which you can set up on your phone, and you get it on here. That works really well. There is also a USB port here, which is something that a lot of bikes miss out on. So riding this back, I put the sat-nav on, I was able to clamp it to the bars like I have done with this camera, and just round the corner there's a little USB port to be able to power it. The bike's quick, it's comfortable. If you're in the market for this sort of bike, if you've got over £16,000 to spend and you want nigh on 180 horsepower and 140 newton meters of torque, then definitely take one of these out for a test ride. But I do warn you, if you do take one out and you have got the money, you're probably not going to leave the showroom without one. I don't want to make it sound like I'm trying to sell the bike, I'm not at all. I'm just being open and honest with all of these bikes. Oh yes. Oh! Holy shitballs. I aspire with my little eye something beginning with N. Let's head over back to our roving reporter who is on location.
This blue and orange livery is new for 2022, and I must admit it's a welcome change. This bike certainly has road presence, whether you like the styling or not. I've covered most of the spec in the riding section, but let's just go through the key numbers again. The 1301cc motor puts out 180 horsepower and a whopping 140 newton meters of torque, which in a bike that weighs 191 kilograms is, as you can imagine, a lot of fun. Bodywork is minimal, but does contain a 16-litre fuel tank, which when I filled up suggested a range of 150 miles, but that's very much dependent on how it's ridden. What did impress me was just how comfortable this bike is for such a performance-focused machine. It's a thrilling ride, no doubt, but it's also a very accomplished bike that will get you from point A to point B very quickly and in comfort too. The power and its delivery make everything effortless, but it's not as raucous and as aggressive as I was expecting it to be. All in all, it's one of the most impressive and enjoyable naked bikes that I've had the opportunity to ride. So until next time, thanks for watching, take care, ride safe, and I'll see you soon. Bye.